And we're live. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to 40K Frontiers Showcase. With us today, we've got the beautiful, lovely dudes, dudettes, no, not just dudes, from Cape Town, South Africa. We got Anthony at the bottom. How you doing, buddy?
I'm always well, mate. Always well.
That's what I love to hear. And we're also the most gorgeous South African man I've ever met, Lehann. How you doing, buddy?
I'm doing well. Thanks for an introduction, mate. Yo, I put my whole day.
Look at you. You had the pose ready and everything. It's like you've been doing that, practicing that all day.
No, of course, just for you, man. Just for you.
Oh, too good, too good. We're going to talk to these two gentlemen about. So they're both from Cape Town, South Africa. Sorry. We're just going to talk to them about what's 40K like in that scene and all that jazz. So to kick things off, so Anthony, I guess introduce yourself. So how long have you been playing 40K for, and then generally, like, what armies do you generally play?
Well, look, yeah. So I'm Anthony. I'm one of the members, at least, or guys who try to play 40K here in South Africa in Cape Town. I've been sadly playing since 2006. Kicked off with, obviously, got into the hobby through, I was a avid PC gamer, played a lot of Dawn of War 1. And some of my buddies who were into 40K, that were playing the tabletop at the time, decided to put me down this path by picking me up an army. And yeah, it's carried on since then. I've generally been playing Space Wolves for, I think, since end of 7th edition, which I think was when was 7th? I think that must have been about 2015 or something like that. And yeah, now, so Space Wolves is my main army, and then now I've just picked up the Votan. So, and yeah, enjoying the game.
Just have an affinity for bearded short men, don't you?
Of course. I mean, if it's got a beard, I'm all over it, mate. Like, I mean, I'm trying to concentrate here, but Lehann on the top there is distracting. And yeah, so I've had the pleasure, obviously, playing since 2006 to really see the community grow, see the game as it's developed, seen a lot of players join, seen a lot of players leave, and yeah, really gotten to play a role, at least, as well in the 40K community here in Cape Town, mostly. And yeah, it's good fun. We love the hobby, and yeah.
Fantastic. What about yourself, Lehann? Like, how long have you been playing for? What armies do you generally play?
So I'm a little bit of a newer joiner than Anthony. I've been reading the books for quite some time. I actually got into the Horus Heresy series way before I got into the hobby, and then a friend of mine, he basically told me, like, there's this game, would you like to give it a try? You know, there's this TTS thing where you can give it a try before you actually fully commit. So we played one TTS game, and then like a week and a half later, I was building 2,000 points of Space Marines. That was at the very tail end of 8th. Played about 4 games of 8th edition, maybe a few more, and then I really got started in 9th edition. My first army was Space Marines, and then I grew up and I got a real army. I'm now playing Custodes, Harlequins, and Votan. It's basically that was my introduction. Like, one game of TTS, lore, and then just like all in committing.
Oh, fantastic. So what sort of armies do you generally collect, Lehann?
So at the moment, my first proper army was Custodes when I really started playing the game. I own quite a large Space Marine collection that I haven't touched in literally years. And then for the last year, I've mostly been playing Harlequins. And then I've just started collecting Votan because I'm a filthy meta chaser.
Beautiful. You've got to love some Votan everywhere, right? Even in South Africa, we can't avoid the Votan.
You can't avoid the doors, man. Like, I'm a fellow short king myself, right? So like, you need to support the boys.
It's got to support your kind, right?
Yeah.
Oh, fantastic! So beautiful. So you guys both mentioned you're from Cape Town. So how big is the player population roughly in that area? Is it like a big number of players locally, or is it still growing, small?
Well, look, there are a lot of, should we say, 40K collectors. I mean, if you look at some of the store groups and that, there's, you'll see on the WhatsApp groups and that there's about 250 people in that who are obviously purchasing and collecting and painting. As far as players, active sort of players in that, probably in our tournament scene or that you see regularly gaming. I mean, generally when we host a tournament or that, we average between about maybe 15 to 25 players. But when we light the fires and Gondor calls for aid, that's then when we can get, then you can start looking at the 60-player tournament and that, which we generally get I think since post-COVID, it's been once a year. We've sort of been pushing a big tournament like that. Then, yeah, so there are a lot. It's very, so there's obviously then also the core community as well, and that often always at sort of tournaments, and that Lehann also falls under one of them as well. And then you get obviously the other sort of not as frequent that tend to join, and yeah, they all join for their own reasons, but I'll get into that a bit later. I don't know if Lehann wants to say anything more on that.
No, I think you've mainly covered that. We've got a core of like let's say tournament going players who are fairly active, play week in and week out at one of our local gaming stores, and like you'll see those faces basically every week, basically every weekend. But then there's a rotating cast that we won't necessarily see at tournaments, that you'll sometimes see in the stores. Sometimes you just like see them like dart in, grab a box, and dart out again. Like, I don't know if they're like scared of like playing the game or something, but yeah, there's definitely a large discrepancy between like the active players and the amount of people who are in some way, shape, or form associated with Warhammer. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. It's like almost like a drug they want to avoid. The tournaments, it's like, oh no, quick. We don't want to get too far deep in, right? We've got a plastic crack addiction already to an extent. We don't want to go that far deep. But yeah, in terms of like play and stuff like that, do you guys generally do like those tournaments? Is that generally what's most popular, or is it more like collections and maybe like some crusades and like people play like maybe once a month? Is that generally what's happens around Cape Town?
So our tournaments aren't incredibly frequent. I'd say like we are regularly scheduled series at one of the LGSs. We've got that like maybe once every 2 months, and then there'll be which is like a 2-day 5-round tournament, and then it'll be interspersed with 1-day 3-round tournaments, maybe like once every month throughout the year. So the tournament scene itself is not super active, as far as like or not super regular. Let me put it like that. As far as narrative and crusade goes, like I'm not incredibly aware of that many narrative and crusade players. Every time like I go and play like a pickup game at the LGS or something, it's usually mostly people playing match play. Yeah, I'd say that's more the kind of scene. Like everyone like comes in, roll some dice, but I haven't seen the larger narrative things too often.
Yeah, like a majority of the 40k that is played here is in the form of match play. All the match play rules. I mean, you won't really see your narratives or your crusade games being played. As far as what I have seen, it hasn't really kicked off. I mean, match play is what gets most of the players together, and you'll often, I mean, as I said earlier, mainly in the tournaments, you'll see the main men that'll be playing. So our tournament setups tend to be, you'll have the main guys, such as Lehann, and then there's a couple others that you'll see playing sort of the top tables and their nonsense lists at the top tables. And a lot of the other guys that come are there really just to come and play. Like when we get the 60-player tournaments together, when we had previously the Cape Town Throwdown and our lovingly called BrinCon tournament, and that it's the core 10, 15, 20 guys who come with who come with the intention of winning, and the rest of the guys, they're happy. They're the oaks that come and bring like a fun. I mean, I'm talking about now, not last year, AdMech list, or you'll see a Land Raiders on the table or something fluffy, and they tend to come in without the intention of even winning a single game, and are just happy to come and play with the toys that they want. Roll some dice, drink some beer, eat pizza. Or they're coming there to aim to win just as many games as they lose and learn some things to maybe get better. We've seen a lot of players that have actually grown in that. Again, I won't mention any of it. I'll say Carl Hayden, for example, this is one of the players who sort of came out of the left field. He was playing Ultramarines for a while, and then suddenly, kept coming, and then he started becoming a terrifying person to face. He's left me very sad in quite a few tournaments as well. And what I can say is that our community is really amazing. There's you pop into any of your local hobby stores weekly, you'll see people be playing. But sadly, a lot of them do still have a little bit of that stigma where they're too scared to come to a tournament because they hear, these players are all whack, and they'll just go in and turn one, they'll be tabled. But we have done a lot, and we do actually owe our local gaming stores for this. We made a lot of strides to show them that it's not the case. So throwing a lot of fun tournaments. We recently had was hosted the Carnage tournament, which is basically it's a 4-man free for all. You come and play, but it's 800 points. It helps get people with smaller collections in, and it's a nonsense game. I mean, it's very random, and there's a lot of backstabbing there, but it's quite fun, and it gets people more accustomed to the rules and stuff. I mean, more needs to still be done. Obviously, there's the fear of people reading online about competitive 40k, and then they sort of, and how it's become. I mean, 40k has grown phenomenally. If I think back when it was in 2006, the tournament scene, and to what it is now, it's a completely different monster. I mean, well, not a monster. It's fantastic. It's amazing. And that is also, sort of that sometimes scares some of the more younger players as well, when they hear about players like Nick Nanavati or Richard Siegler, who are, these machines, and they seem to then impose it on us, thinking, oh no, well, we go to tournaments, we're going to play against these monstrously big brain players who are going to make it, unfair or unfun. Or a friend of theirs goes to a tournament, has one bad game, and then they think that's what it's all like. So a lot does still have to be done in the South African scene. As I said, we've got a lot of players who are buying and collecting, but not coming to the table. So a lot still needs to be done there, but we are growing as a community. And as I said, it's a fantastic community scene, because a lot of players also, they only have one army or that as well. So there's more here. It's more, not so much, it's more people play the army that they feel attached to an extent. So, they've got their collections, their favorite army, regardless of how well it's performing overseas. You'll still see them be bringing them to tournaments and that. We don't. So, I mean, we haven't quite been hit with the famous swarm that's been going on abroad as well. I mean, because people just, they don't own Siege Demons, or, the Thousand Suns players here, they like their Marines. They don't like they don't want to deal with their filthy demon allies or whatever. So it has created a very unique meta for us, and an amazing one. I know when our nationals last year, I think it was covered prior to the release of the new Chaos book, we had about 6 or 7 Chaos players there with word bearers with that awfully old horrible old codex, and but it keeps things dynamic, keeps it fun. It's a good scene. So yeah,
that's awesome. That's cool to hear. It sounds like yours very similar to what mine was in Canberra show. In sense of that whole whack tournament player thing was old stigma, and it was very, very small for a long time. And then eventually over time, good personalities and good people have gone to the scene, and it's growing and growing and growing. And people I guess taking that step into the deep ocean of tournament play and learning that, they're not all the most ridiculous players in the world, but it's great to hear that it's all growing, and you still keep that uniqueness in the sense of your local metas. I know here locally, we, for whatever reason, Space Marines are still popular. Imperial Knights can be randomly popular, and before the guard book, I had an RTT or whatever, it was a 20-person RTT, and it was 7 guard players before the new guard codex. What the fuck?
Brave man, wow. Okay, brave man.
That book wasn't that bad. Let's be honest. It still had the tells of 8, but they could put some firepower down the line. I mean, you sat there cringing every time they were shooting you out of line of sight.
I feel like that is an opinion that is a direct result of our terrain sets, though.
Okay, yeah, fair enough. That could very well be.
You touched the beast there, Lehann. So what's your terrain like generally? Obviously, there's been a massive transition period from 8th to 9th and prior editions up to now. And now we've got a lot of the standardized terrain sets and something called play place terrain. No idea what that stuff is, but what do you guys generally do over in South Africa? What do you have? And I've got the photo ready whenever you're ready, Lehann.
The photo, okay. So our terrain sets is very, very dependent on where the tournament is you're playing, right? We basically have 2 main LGSs that host most of our tournaments, and the terrain sets you're going to be seeing on the day is dependent on which one of those 2 you play at. And then it obviously vastly, yes, that is our very favorite table, the ice table. As you can see, there's no footprint, there's no light cover, there is no obscuring except what bare rock provides. It's one of our favorites. It's a recurring a recurring piece at one of our tournaments. We recently, the large tournament that Anthony was alluding to earlier, the Cape Town Throwdown at the start of last year, there was actually like a custom set of terrain that was very heavily based on the current WTC setup that was designed for us. And some of the LGSs have like started buying up sets of these terrain. So like the usual deal is, right, like they reserve those for the top tables. It's a relatively balanced set. So like if you keep winning games, you keep playing on the balanced terrain. You know, every now and again the tables get randomized and my heart is very sore when I don't get to play on the balance set. But yeah, like it heavily depends. Like that set also, for example, you need about a set and a half that to make like the dense WTC board. So it's still relatively light because we tend to like our terrain quite light. I think my favorite summary like of our terrain situation was at our recent nationals. Myself and I got an opponent who's playing Kronos Tyranids, very heavy shooting army. You know, I'm playing Harlequins, both of us like, you know, side-eyeing each other across the table. Like there's some heavy damage here, right? Like it's a bit scary. And we get to the table and it's 5 objective mission, 3 in the middle, and you can basically sit in your home and, you know, you've got firing lines to his home, to all 3 of the middle ones. And both of us were sitting at this table like, yo, I don't know, man. Yo, I'm kind of scared. Like I really want to go first. And the TO comes by and, you know, he tells us, no, don't worry, guys. Like this table hasn't set up yet. You know, and there's this collective sigh of relief going down. Like we're gonna be okay. And he walks around the table. He hums and ahs a bit, and that like one sliver of my home objective that I could like maybe tow in a single troop in to hold like relatively like obscured. Like he takes that bit of the train and he pulls it away. And he goes, "Cool, thanks, guys." And I'm sitting there like, "Cool." But I went first, so you know, all's well to end well. Not the end of the world.
Should have left the briefcase next to the TO's car, mate, and then he wouldn't have moved it away. But we generally we don't have a lot of the time. You'll be very lucky if you get to a table and you can hold an objective behind line of sight. That's not generally how we play. We want it to be if you're going to get on an objective, then you need to put on your blindfolds, have your cigarette, and get ready for the firing squad. Because you know we're not pansies. Yeah, I suppose Lehann's covered the terrain very well. It really depends on which who's hosting the tournament and that. What has become very popular is the Cape Town Throwdown, which is like the WTC terrain effectively. I don't think we've ever had any tournament or played any with the GW setup. And then then the others just, I suppose, you know, Ice World is one of the worst examples, but and it used to be worse than that. Those are the new Ice World terrain pieces. But then it just came down to, you know, sort of a lot of the GW models, like you'd come to a table and you've got that, I think, what's it called, Fortress of Absolution or a Redemption, and that's sort of in the middle of the table. And you've got to figure out how the heck the new rules are going to interact with that terrain piece from, you know, 6th ed. So, yeah, but it is very dependent. But, ultimately, the boards are generally very good and they tend to look very good as well. I can't say that for us. I have seen obviously some of the online tournaments with the bigger ones, and I get it. If you've got a tournament with 200-300 people, you're not really able to populate the tables very well. But ours generally, from the top to the bottom, you've got a lot of terrain to work with. That's something that I suppose I can praise our local gaming stores and the guys who are organizing the tournaments for getting together.
Oh, that's fantastic. And at least they're trying to invest into the community as well, right? Like you're investing community money into it so you can improve the train set. And that's all you can ask your local events and tournament organizers to do. Like it's a massive upfront cost for them to get all the trains set up and just all the labor and stuff as well, just to get it assembled and painted. So at least they're trying to improve and stuff like that as well. And they're upfront about it. So look, at least you know what you're getting into, right? So you can make your decision. So
we owe
I guess that's also a pertinent point that you're making, Sam. Like we know what we're getting into. So like it's gotten to the point where like we've developed a sub-meta here where we sort of build around, because you know what the train's going to be, you know what the situation is. So like we tend to value monsters and vehicles a bit more than you typically see like in lists overseas. Just because like, you know, it's on our tables it's generally possible to move them around the table. Like you're not going to get move blocked to death. And then actually having something to sit, you know, on a home objective that isn't going to die is quite valuable. So like there's been an effect on our lists. And it's, like Anthony said, like the tables look great, and it's one of those things where you know what you're going into, so you plan for it. And that's cool.
I mean, and on the topic, I mean, obviously, like, I mean, our local gaming stores have done, well, the community has done phenomenal. I mean, from what I recall, like nearing the end of 7th edition. I don't know how long have you played 40k for, Sam? I haven't asked yet.
Off and on for a while, but like I didn't start playing again like consistently until 8th, so don't worry. Like, but I am a fan of the templates from back in the day. I do remember the template days.
Oh no, because I know, like, why? Arguing about how many models are underneath this template and taking hours of movement phases because, all right, now I've got to make sure every model's 2 inches apart and I want to minimize my template bombings and that. I mean, that brings back nightmares because, like, I know, like 7th ed for us, like, it was bad. It was a bad time. I mean, 7th edition effectively almost killed 40k in Cape Town. I mean, the community was basically shrinking. But I mean, can you blame us? 7th ed was a mess. There was mass amounts of rule bloat. The imbalance was ridiculous when you're sitting with, I mean, nightmares of the old grav weapons, D weapons, the detachment systems, the double gladius, the lion's blade for dark angels. My complaint being templates, silly cover, and the jank that you could get. And invisibility that I will never forget. It did a very big number on a lot of even our most dedicated players. And that's also, yeah, I mean, then obviously with the inception of 8th, the clearing of the playing field and our local gaming stores, they really did a great job in starting to recreate that itch and that love for 40k. And I mean, since then, it's really been uphill. 9th has been incredible. I mean, obviously with a tighter set of rules than what 8th edition had, and a much neater game, it's expanded. I mean, we hope to see it continue growing like this, because hopefully we can start, competing with you guys. Can't have Australia always, come and win the world team tournaments and that. You need some competition. Clearly, the States and the UK can't slow you guys down. So, yeah, that's where we're hoping to eventually get to.
Not advocating South African cricket team, but that's a different tangent.
Low blow.
Cricket and rugby rivalry, but it's also got a lot to do with, and it also, I must attribute it to you guys as well, and to your, I don't know whether you call them competitors or colleagues in the other podcasts. I mean, because like since the inception of 8th, you look at the immense growth of popularity that 40k has had on the internet. That's just made content so much more accessible. And easier to sort of get into the game and get people to meet each other and that as well. I mean, it's guys like yourself that we can thank that for. So keep doing it.
Oops, the old hit the mute button. Sorry about that one. Yeah, like obviously there's there's been like a massive growth in content creation, just people throughout 40k just creating stuff, and it's good to get so much information out there. And you touched on like Nick Navavani's Art of War and stuff like that. Do you guys generally see a lot of influence from those areas come in to you guys? Like, does that help with growth? Or people say, "Oh, I listened to this on Art of War, like Siegler said this, or Vanguard Tactics said this, or I played this on, I guess, TTS and saw this in the TTS community." Do you see that sort of influence be played out in South Africa, or do you guys get to keep your own meta influences per se? I guess with the table design and stuff like that, you do skew towards vehicles and monsters, but do you see a lot of that online information like filter in?
Not to the extent that I think it changes. There we go. Thank you, ESCOM. That's my load shedding, but there's the backup. Yeah. That not to the extent that I think it really shakes our meta. What it does do is it gets people talking about 40k. You'll get people, and I mean, there's a sparring buddy of mine that I tend to play quite a few games with, sort of getting him into the hobby, getting him to be a bit more streamlined and comfortable with the game, and he'll come and tell me what he's just heard on Auspex Tactics or things like that, and how it sort of changes the way one thinks about it, but not to the point that you see people bringing sort of Siegler lists or things like that to the tournaments. So it more just gets people more engaged in the hobby and more sort of talking about it and discussing things and that, which is good.
I think something that like we often joke about in South Africa, like that our national sport isn't actually like cricket or rugby or soccer, whatever it may be. Our national sport is complaining. Like South Africans really love to complain like so much you've got no idea. So I think one of the things that we sort of tend to consume is we consume content like that, you know, because it's lovely to complain about the new BS that is coming onto the block. So
yeah, I suppose it goes back to what I previously said there as well. Like, you know, we people be moaning, oh, Flame is overpowered, people just spam them, you know, but
yeah, and like nobody has plays Flamers, so like nobody actually complaining about.
Oh, too good. So obviously we're talking about right now like Cape Town, South Africa, and stuff like that. But obviously, South Africa is a massive country. So if people are unaware, like there's a bunch of like the cities in this massive region area. So obviously you have like Pretoria's obviously famous, I guess, area, and then like Johannesburg and stuff like that. So how far away, like, do you get to interact with many of those communities that are actually quite distant away? And like explain to the audience like how far away those communities are.
Yeah, I think what we can do is just a discussion, mainly maybe the communities and that we've discovered as well. And so I mean, or you know, distances for tournaments and events and that. I mean, as far as Cape Town is concerned, us in our tournaments, we don't. There's not much travel. You know, we've got, you know, it's probably about 20 minutes to whichever is your respective local gaming store. Then there's, although, you know, but that doesn't mean we don't like traveling in order to play some 40K. Just as an example, as see, when you initially reached out to us, there was the recent DorpCon tournament. Now, well, I don't think it's actually officially, we call it DorpCon, which is held in a small farming town called Bredasdorp. Like, and then one thing I need to stress is, like, we were amazed to find out that there was a 40K community there. I mean, Bredasdorp is a really small town in the middle of nowhere. And I mean, it's about 3 hours drive through farmlands and nothing else to get to. And I mean, we found out through one of our members on a WhatsApp group. We said, hey, there's a tournament being hosted in Bredasdorp. And we thought, well, I mean, we need to see this. So we got in touch with a guy called Hilly from Playhouse Warhammer, who runs the scene there. Picked up some of our delinquents, and we made a road trip of it. Spent the weekend, and only to meet a fantastic group of guys and an incredibly well-run tournament. I mean, every table for each mission, the terrain was predefined, and good terrain. Each table had the pages next to the table, which sets out, tells you this terrain has these keywords, is this setup, this is how far everything is from each other. And they also, we found they played a very good game of 40K there as well. So now when they have it, now we sort of built a bridge there. So now whenever they have a tournament, they let us know, and we do our best to send some players there. And what the main goal there is obviously to look at building communities, because, you know, we come to their tournaments and they'll start coming to ours, and people will start to, you know, interact and grow. Before COVID, every year as well, there was what was called the Battle of the Bay, which was held in Port Elizabeth. Which is about a 9-hour drive. They've got a very old sort of 40K community there as well, a fantastic group of guys. And so what we'd do is we'd gather 9 to 10 guys, and we'll take a 9-hour road trip and, you know, rent a house there, and spend the weekend playing drunk 40K, which, I mean, if you haven't done it, I'd recommend it. I mean, I've got memories of, I think it was my second game in the tournament. I was about 7 or 8 beers in, because I'd lost a bet. And I was swaying at the table, and I was so pissed. I didn't even realize that the guy who I was playing against, he was brand new to the hobby. He was playing his 6th Ed Dark Angels Codex after the 7th Ed Codex had been released. And I wasn't even aware of that he was playing the wrong book. Then we've got our nationals, which is once a year. It alternates between Cape Town and Johannesburg. Now, they're about 15,000 kilometers apart. Sorry, 1,500 kilometers, not 15,000. That would be much farther north in Africa. So it's about 1,500 kilometers apart. If anybody's listening, I did do that calculation. It's about 932 miles for savages that use the Imperial system, or it's roughly 10 million movement phases if you have a 6-inch move. So
imagine playing an army with a 6-inch move.
Oh, Jesus, Votan, it would be a dream. So there are quite a bit of distances, obviously, but, you know, we make that move. I can't say I know the Joburg community too well. They do tend to send maybe 1 or 2 guys down to our tournaments, And then there's Durban that I believe also has a Warhammer community, but I know nothing of anybody who plays there. And if you have a community there, please give us a shout, because come, let's roll some dice. So that's about it.
So like there's a massive distance, like 1,500 kilometers, like being like a 15-hour drive, like 15-hour drive.
Around about 15 hours of drive. We'll fly. It's about a 2-hour flight.
Yeah, it's a 2-hour flight. Like you don't drive that. It's not. Yeah,
you're driving through.
Not doing that.
Basically, our Karoo, so it's through desert, which it's a long drive.
No, that makes complete sense. And sorry, talking about communities and stuff like that. So Lehann, you talked about previously how you played a bunch of TTS. Do you guys get like much of a TTS scene in South Africa, or is it just yourself, Lehann, just conquering the world on TTS as a South African?
I'm not particularly aware of a large TTS scene. It's mostly like in my regular play group, it's really just me. Like there's a bit of a distaste for TTS. I guess like we're all very tactile people who like putting models on the table, which is fair enough, right? But yeah, like there is some guys that dabble. I know we used to have a very good player that has since moved overseas, Henning, who used to play a lot of TTS, like unholy amounts of TTS, as in like 9 games a week of TTS, which like one day, like maybe I'll try and emulate that, but no, that man was a monster. But other than that, no, we don't particularly we don't have our own TTS leagues or anything like that. Yeah, I guess it's more like individual players that every now and again will like go play Alpha League or go play T5S2 or whatever the case may be.
Sure, that makes complete sense. And you guys talked about before, like you've obviously emphasized a couple of times, and we were talking previously about the hobby side of the 40K. So is there a massive hobby emphasis for you guys in South Africa, and like producing models and making sure they're nice and clean and stuff like that, and well done, well painted?
Yeah, I think we definitely have a like quite a large hobby scene relative to our active tournament playing scene. Like Anthony said earlier, like the store groups, there's a factor of 10 of 12 more people who are like active on specifically the Warhammer store groups versus the people who actively play tournaments. And like we've got more painting studios than we do LGSs. So there's a lot of people who like are invested in the hobby specifically because they enjoy the painting and the modeling aspects of it, and they don't necessarily play. And there's definitely also a drive for a very high quality painting. Like for myself, that's not a thing. I'm not a gifted painter. I put paint on models to get my 10 points and call it a day. But for the wider scene, there's definitely a big emphasis on hobbying.
You can rock up and you can see some beautifully painted work. And one as well, we do enforce the battle ready as well, to obviously try and encourage people, those who wouldn't, to get some paint on their models. And we're also we do also push WYSIWYG a lot in our tournaments as well. Yeah, I think Lehann covered most of that. Nothing really much more to add.
No, fair enough. More than fair. You talked about previously, I know, sort of behind the scenes, it looks like it's next year potentially. Team South Africa are going to try and head to the WTC. Like, is much preparations underway, or are you sort of like just getting some feelers out for right now?
No, we started the decision to actually like commit to this and like say, okay, we're going to try and make this happen maybe 3 weeks ago. Myself and some of our locals have been talking about this for almost a year, that we want to do it like as a vague someday. And then there was some impetus. Alcohol may or may not have been involved. When like we finally just went like, okay, you know what, we're gonna see if we can make this happen. Like, gonna apply for captaincy. We're gonna start like reaching out to our locals, try and get like people to commit. Yeah, and we've gotten to the point now where like we're in the planning phase. Like we're trying to find out what kind of like the costs are going to be associated with going. Like, can we get the 4 or the 5 guys together from locally? We've got some expats that live overseas that like I've already talked to that have committed and like willing to go. So at this point, it looks like we're going to be doing this for the first time next year. Incredibly excited. It's been like a mind dream since I've started playing 40K to attend WTC. So yeah, I really hope we can make it happen.
Oh, fantastic. Do you guys generally play any team tournaments, or is it mainly singles, and it's going to be like your first 8v8 ever experience per se?
To my knowledge, there has never been a team tournament in South Africa. So like we are fully guarded to the fact that we are going to get bent, but that's fine because it's going to be fun. We're going to learn a lot. But yeah, no, excited. It's not a thing here, so maybe we'll hopefully start to organize some proto team tournaments. I don't think the scene is particularly large enough or mature enough yet to really support like 8v8s. But we'll try and do something smaller. Get some experience doing the whole pairings thing. Let's not lose every WTC game because we don't know how pairings work. So that's probably something that we're gonna start looking at in the next year, like as we prepare for going into 2023.
Yeah, as Lehann had said, we don't think we've ever really had a team tournament, or at least in the new format. We've done, like years ago, we've done like a doubles tournament or that, where you play a 1500 for, back then I suppose it was a 1850 points. But as Lehann correctly said, I think the reason for that is that our community itself, I don't feel has, even though it's grown drastically since like you say 2010 and that, and it hasn't quite reached that maturity level. Obviously not referring to hitting puberty, but it's more that mindset and commitment level in order for us to then sort of say consistently, all right, we're going to have an 8 or a 4-man team tournament, and expect people to pitch, or at least do it properly. But as the community grows, as things develop, I feel that we will eventually hit that point. I mean, it's not now, it'll probably be in about maybe. Are you still there? Jeez, I was hoping I wasn't boring you that much.
No, you're still here. Apologies, my camera's just being a pain and causing issues. So please continue. Sorry, everyone listening and watching. Fortunately, technical issues has forced my face cam to come off, which is probably better for everyone else and the advertising revenue for sure. But
basically, it's just more something that I see that we might maybe hit that point. Give it 5 to the 5, 6, 7 years. We can probably look at reaching that point where we could look at consistently having team tournaments this side. But obviously, I mean, as Lehann has mentioned, there is now talks of us wanting to, at least dip our toes into, I guess, the international pool and, try our hand at it. And hey, if we walk away with one game, I'm telling you now, we will celebrate it like we've won the damn tournament.
Hell yes. No, our local TOs don't know it yet, but they're all going to be getting some bribes under the table to like help us play with the WTC FAQ, just get some practice in for the guys that are going to be going. They don't know it yet, but that's coming.
Too good. What more could you want? A little bit of bribery goes a long way, right? I mean,
yeah, exactly.
Right. There's anything wrong with it, do you? I mean,
oh, too funny. So obviously we talk about, like, I guess, collecting Warhammer and stuff in South Africa. Is it expensive to collect Warhammer and stuff in South Africa? Obviously, like from the country perspective, like, is it expensive, like in terms of cost, or also can you actually get the stuff you want, or is it very hard to collect? Like, you can't, if you like here for example, we've been wanting to get a Tyranid Harpy since the Crusher Stampede days and haven't been able to really get one. It's just they're not available. Is it hard to get models?
Well, you see, because we're still on planet Earth and they're all the way out in Australia. What I can, it isn't too difficult. What I can say is there used to be a lot of challenges in getting models here in South Africa, and I think that might have also been a bit of a stifle in our growth as well. However, obviously recently, and I will say that they can enjoy the plug here, but in 2018, a store opened called the Sword and Board in Cape Town, and then honestly, it became a breeze. I mean, if they didn't, they're a fully stocked store. If they didn't have stock, you can order through them, and within a week or two, you've got your models and you've got your order. So as it stands genuinely now, there isn't any sort of difficulty that I've encountered. And also, like, price-wise, it's not even that badly priced. I mean, here, for us, it's about 700 Rand can net you a box of intercessors, which is the equivalent of about £32 or 40 US. So it's not that expensive either. So no, there isn't any real challenges. I don't know if Lehann's encountered any.
Yeah, so if you look at it in absolute terms, right? There's some interesting audio going on.
We should all be doing hitting the gym.
So in absolute terms, like Anthony just alluded to, we're actually one of the cheapest places worldwide to collect Warhammer, right? If you do like a straight US dollar conversion, our prices are quite cheap. But like seeing as if you convert that to relative terms, right? Like seeing as we are still a relatively poor economic country, like we've got a very weak currency, like relative to our average earning potential, it's not like it's a cheap hobby. Like it's still an expensive hobby to collect. But it's not particularly challenging. Like, and it is possible. What I will say though is like Forge World is like not a thing here. You're not getting it here. Our syntax on products like that is exorbitant. We had one of our store owners actually got a Warhound Titan shipped in, and like the cost that he ended up paying for it versus what it costs in the UK is something utterly horrendous. Forge World is just not a thing here.
No, I understand that. Yeah, I completely understand that. Like, it's funny. There's always with us, like probably in the Pacific region, like South Africa. So, like, sometimes it's often cheaper, funny enough, to fly to the UK, literally pick up the model and fly back than it is to actually import it. Sometimes and stuff like that. It's horrendous. It's dumb. Like, and it's like time and time again, like for various products, which is cheaper to literally fly there, be a donkey, and just carry it all the way back. Be a manual. That's yeah. Look. It's the cost of like living outside the UK and stuff, right? Well, like a massive country.
I mean, clearly we need to start a smuggling ring, right? Like you just like you guys fly over from Australia to South Africa. Like we just buy scads of models. You guys fly it out, and we just take like a couple of victory points at WTC. Like
there we go.
There we go. Yeah.
There you go. The World 2 Championships, the only reason we actually go is actually just smuggle models back to our own nations rather than actually compete. What more could you want? No, too good. So you talked about the so it was the sorting board. So actually, that's funny enough. How the first time I heard about you guys, obviously they're doing a bunch of GTs and stuff like that, and events they host and stuff, things like that. So my understanding also is traditionally, I know last year, like you were one of the only places in the world hosting an event on Boxing Day, which is like a traditional like a holiday for any for Americans, people who are unaware, like on the 26th of December, so the day after Christmas. Boxing Day is a traditional Commonwealth holiday. So do you guys have any preview or insight into what the event will contain or include? I've just lost connection. Great. No?
I think we lost Anthony.
Oh, we lost Anthony? Okay, no worries. Lotion's getting him. So
we're also a Commonwealth country, so Boxing Day is traditionally a holiday here as well. As far as I know, I haven't gotten too many details on the Boxing Day tournament just yet. I don't think it's really been posted or up on BCP, but as far as I know, it's a 1 day. Like it's essentially going to be like a small RTT, and whoever manages to drag themselves out of bed after eating way too much Christmas food, is probably going to be attending the next day. We're probably looking at like 12 to 20 players. Again, I would be very surprised if it's more than that. But yeah, it's a good time, right? Like right after Christmas dinner, right after spending some time with the family, you get to roll some dice. It's always a good time.
Happy days indeed. What more could you want? Nothing. I can't think of anything more. So
nothing exactly.
Do you guys generally try and do like this submission in advance, or do you guys just like rock up day off and just have your list ready and just play what you've got?
So that depends. So our 2-day events or our 5-round events generally, like we've got list submissions would be on something like a Wednesday or the Thursday, which give the TO like time to check everything, and then we go into it like on the Friday. He released the lists for everyone to look at. For the 1-day events, like Sword and Board hosts like a 1-day 3-round event quite often. They would usually like you send a list in at some nebulous point. They're not particularly worried about when. Like you rock up what you have. And then you just play. Like they also tend to be the more new player friendly tournaments, I guess, as these ones. Like there's not too many stringent requirements.
Yeah, sure, fair enough. And we got Anthony back. For anyone also, by the way, we talked to the reference on Lotion. For anyone who's unaware, like this is something I learned as well when I played Lehann on TTS. Like in South Africa, like they have during like night times generally, they have to turn off power to help conserve things, and like for a number of hours they have to turn off power, which is pretty shitty. And like yeah, like you just get notified about it. So that's what it is, by the way. Is that more to be said about it, or that's it?
Yeah, it's basically we've got problems with our electrical infrastructure, like countrywide. Yeah. It's something that's been in the pipeline for very long, like since 2008, essentially. Usually this is a thing more common in winter when power use is supposedly higher, but at the moment we're having some proper problems. So we're at stage 6 load shedding now, which means that we don't have power for 8 hours a day.
Yeah.
And it trades off between like districts. So like my neighborhood its power would be off, and then the next door neighborhood theirs would be on for 2-hour stints, and then we switch. It's lovely. It's great. Gives you so much extra time in the dark. It's great.
Oh, and I think, Anthony, you said like you get some extra painting there, right? Instead of playing video games and stuff like that, at least it allows you to do some hobbying and stuff like that. If lockdowns weren't enough. Yeah, because as he slowly nods his head, so it's all good. So do you guys like? Is it funny like in that area? Like, do you guys just travel from district to district to district, trying to get like your power on? Like, let's like get.
Well, that is a thing, right? Like, there's this whole planning like phase that goes on. We've got an app called Eskom Se Push, which is like a pun on a swear word, I guess. That is like it's a dig at our like national power company essentially. But they do like schedules of when your load shedding in your area is going to be. So you'd wake up in the morning, you check your schedule, and then if you know you've got load shedding at like a certain time, and you would try to organize something. Like, you'd either go out for dinner, or you'd go to gym, or you just go be anywhere in a block that the power is actually on, and you can be a human being and like be productive. We've also got like, for example, I've got a gigantic marine battery right next to my desk on the right side here with an inverter, just that like during the shortest 2 hour stints I can still have power.
Thank you, Scum, for the time.
I think we've got Anthony back on a delay. No, okay, he's gone again. Yeah, so like there's all sorts of solutions and stuff that we have to like try to come up with so you can like continue living life. Yeah, it's an interesting exercise. Like, the one thing that it hasn't actually affected is like Warhammer tournaments. We have played some Warhammer tournaments in the dark. Like, that is a thing that has happened. It's great, like you yank out the old phone, you wobbly model syndrome it on top of one of your ruins, and you just go. It's fine.
Too good. That's fantastic. What could you want? Before
I think
maybe we can hear Anthony again. There you go. It's all right. All good. So before we head off, so unfortunately, Anthony's not going to be able to join us to the end. But do you have any final shout-outs or plugs you want to put out, Lehann, before we start things off?
Wow. Okay. Off the top of my head, I think Anthony covered like most of what we wanted to do. Like, to our two, like the closest local gaming stores, the Battle Bunker and to Sword and Board. Like, they're basically the throbbing heart of this community, right? Or the beating heart of this community. Like, they're what allows us to actually play and connect with people. And like, our tournaments are always there. So like, to the two stores, like, thanks you guys for everything you do. And then to our local TO Bernie that puts on most of our tournaments, and then to Gili who puts on our tournament in Bredasdorp. Like, both of them, they throw a fantastic tournament, and this community would not be the size it is or in the health that it is if it wasn't for those two individuals. So big thanks to both of them as well.
Yeah, shout out to all LGSs. Without them, we wouldn't be able to do this hobby. So thanks to them. So I appreciate it. Thanks everyone for joining. I hope you enjoyed the chat, and catch you all next time. Thanks everyone. Have a good one. Take care.
Thanks, Sam.